Hello everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be discussing why I like gold better than silver, but this is not an investment video and it's actually not necessarily my opinion. I sort of leave that up to you, but try to give you some of the different things to think about. I did a why I like silver over gold video, so this is the counterpart or the counter argument to that one, and so we're going to be exploring some new dimensions to analyze this with, as well as some reasons to think through where gold might be better that I also argued and tried to argue the counterpoint on the previous video in favor of silver. So let's get in with tip number one. I think one main reason to take a look at gold is that it traditionally has been the gold standard. It's sort of the main precious metal that people have always looked at it. And I think it's like silly, some people are like, well, if it's just how it's always been done, why should we continue to do that? But when you think about what is a safe haven, what do people consider to be the basis for money, it definitely is gold over silver. And so the gold is much more viewed as a precious metal, and we'll dive into this a little bit more in the future, versus silver, which has a maybe greater range of uses. So anyways, I think that when you're looking at something that's only going to be traded, gold is not producing cash. It's not a cash flowing business or asset or stock or something like that. Gold is going to be sold for what the next person will pay for it. So because it's sort of it's a very much like sentiment and just what people value it, I think gold generally comes to mind from an investor perspective as the way to go. Number two is a pretty brief point, but we'll just say approximately silver is $25 an ounce, gold is $2,000 an ounce. So that means that I think that's like an 80 times gold to silver ratio. And I think what that means is that it's going to be much easier to store gold. So if you want to have a lot of precious metals, if you're going to buy a bunch of silver, even if you're just storing it in a safe or something, to have tons of 1,000 ounce or 100 ounce silver bars, maybe it's more aesthetically, pleasing because you have a huge chunk of silver in your hand, and you're probably not going to get that with gold, but it can be much more efficient. You can have a small little roll of 1 ounce gold coins that are all worth $2,000 each. So that's not negligible. Traditionally, and this can always change, but gold is a bit less volatile, and we'll get into a little bit more of that at a high level in my next point. But because gold is $2,000 an ounce, and there's, I believe, a lot more sort of money in gold across the world versus silver, when you have a 5% price swing in silver, that happens much more frequently than with gold. So silver, if it drops $1, that's 4%. And, in the past week, as of the filming of this video, there was like a 10% or 12% move. Whereas gold can be subject to that, but, even $100 in, per ounce movement, that's 4 times the overall price of silver. And on a percentage basis, it also goes much slower than silver does. So for people who like a little bit less volatility, historically gold is going to be a better pick. I think a huge thing to consider is that gold's uses in industry are much lower. I think it's like 12% of its overall demand, whereas silver, it's over half. So gold is much more insulated from a huge drop in demand that can really affect silver. So on the other hand, if the industrial demand really ramps up, that can push the price of silver up quite a bit, but silver is much more abundant in terms of being used in everyday things, whereas gold, most of the demand is in jewelry, from central banks, from collectors and stackers, and that's really where the gold demand is coming from. So much different sort of use cases for the two metals. And again, these are general rules, and it's important to purchase wisely, but gold, on a percentage basis, generally is going to have lower premiums than silver to own or to purchase. And a lot of that has to do with the volume, but I believe even at volume, when you can get a volume discount, if you're buying a bunch of silver all at once, it's more likely that if silver is like $3 an ounce over, that's over 10%, very easy to have that, where if it's a reputable dealer, they're not going to be charging you much more than $50 an ounce over what they're able to purchase it at. and a good dealer can generally buy it very close to spot, or if they have a big industry connection, maybe they can get it for $30 over, but it really should be sort of within 5% of the gold price. Obviously that can change, and sometimes there's a much different market for paper versus physical, but the premiums are going to be lower with gold. And lastly, I alluded to it already in terms of not being in industry, but it's really the form of precious metals that the super big investors are probably more likely to look at, and those include central banks, who they're not really stockpiling massive quantities of silver, and maybe this will change, but the central bank buying of gold or central bank selling of gold is, the set of precious metals is really revolving around gold, because of its sort of place in the world as the original money dating back to 650 BC or so. And so I think that just is never negligible. And I know I've mentioned that in a few different contexts, but I think that it's really something to think about in terms of a clear use case. I think it's a less fun, there's obviously some reason in silver, and can watch that video for the argument on the other side, but you have to have much more money to purchase gold, and you have a less easy, when you buy gold, you want to only buy really trusted versions of gold, whereas silver, there's a lot of like poured silver bars just because it's cost effective. Nobody wants to buy a risky 5.6 ounce like gold statue, whereas if you pay $150 for like a silver odd bar, that's a more feasible thing to do. But anyways, hope that this was helpful and provided you with some interesting considerations. Thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to visit our website, treasuretown.com, to stay up to date on everything going on the channel, and possibly get some great deals on coins and collectibles. We look forward to seeing you on our future videos, and best wishes until then.